At the drama's beginning, we see the female lead, Ji Xing, calling her mother and saying, "I have found an apartment to live in." When her mother then talks about her marriage, she says, "I will find an apartment first, then I will think about marriage." Afterward, she takes her bag and leaves for work. Next, we see a scene on a plane where a man, Mr. Wang, is talking on a call and says, "The medical lab is yours, Han Ting. He just arrived from abroad. He won't be able to manage everything here for long." Then Han Ting sits down next to him. This is our male lead. He gives him some papers and says, "I have come to save you." Actually, a man had sold an apartment in Europe at a very low price. Han Ting says to him, "If you support me, I can buy more labs like this one." So he agrees. On the other hand, when Ji Xing reaches the metro station, she finds out it is closed. Now it takes a long time for a taxi to arrive, and she is getting late for the office. Therefore, she starts cycling to the office. Moving on, we see Yu Wan, who is Han Ting's cousin. She tells him to come to the office early. Then his assistant says, "Mr. Wang is not coming." So Han Ting says, "Now I think your work is going to be done, so I am ending the call." On Ji Xing's way, her friend calls and says, "Investors have arrived at the company and are about to approve your idea." So she says, "I will arrive soon." Now on the road, she collides with a bike, and the biker collides with Han Ting's car. Now the driver comes out and asks the biker to pay compensation, but the biker says, "I don't have any money." Now Ji Xing comes forward and starts explaining that this happened because of someone else, but it is also her fault, so she will also pay half. Han Ting watches her from inside and then remembers her face from the past, thinking, "This is the same person." Now Ji Xing says to the driver, "I will give you my contact number. You tell me the compensation amount." Han Ting also tells the driver to take the number and let them go. Afterward, a meeting scene is shown where a worker is presenting a project to Han Ting, which is Ji Xing's project. Now Ji Xing has not explained the project's end, so Han Ting tells the worker to explain it. But he cannot, so he says, "The person who made this project should explain it." Then Ji Xing comes forward. She is shocked to see Han Ting, but now she relaxes and starts presenting her project. Seeing her, Han Ting remembers an old memory when Ji Xing was giving a similar speech. In the present, after Ji Xing's presentation, Han Ting leaves. In the next scene, Ji Xing is at a restaurant with her friend when her boss calls. She tells her, "Tonight, I want to introduce you to someone, so dress up and come." Now at night, Ji Xing is ready and waiting for Zheng Di. Then she comes to pick her up. She says, "Where we are going today, you have to explain your project. If you convince them for this project, your project will be doubled." When Ji Xing arrives with Zheng Di, she is shocked to see Han Ting. Han Ting is also surprised, but he does not react. Now Zheng Di introduces everyone to Ji Xing, and then they start playing cards. Now at the end of the game, Ji Xing has a card. This reminds Han Ting of a past memory when Ji Xing was playing cards with everyone during school time. She was about to lose but was playing very confidently. The same thing happens here, so Han Ting gives up to save her from losing. Then Zheng Di smiles and says, "We have won." So Han Ting says, "You are sitting in your lucky seat. Try exchanging seats," and then leaves. Zheng Di follows him, so he says, "Do you want to do this project by depending on your employees?" So she says, "She knows this project well, that's why I brought her here." On the other hand, Ji Xing is telling everyone about her robot project. Han Ting says to Zheng Di, "Take Ji Xing back. It doesn't look good for her to be among such strangers." Zheng Di says yes, comes inside, and tells Ji Xing, "Go home by taxi." Afterward, they also start leaving. Han Ting says to Zheng Di, "We will cooperate, but don't bring Ji Xing next time." Zheng Di agrees and says to him, "Come, let's go outside." But Han Ting makes an excuse and refuses. Now coming home, Ji Xing says to her friends, "I worked with Han Ting in university, but he was pretending as if he didn't even know me." Her friend asks, "What was your relationship?" Ji Xing replies, "We were just university fellows, and our subjects were also different, so we didn't interact much." Meanwhile, Han Ting also says to his friend, "She was my university fellow. I had decided to confess, but then Grandpa came and said that I have to go to Germany for studies." He sadly says to Ji Xing, "I will keep messaging you." His friend asks, "Did she reply?" Han Ting says, "No." Here, Ji Xing says to her friend, "He didn't message me. We waited for him for many days. And today, he didn't even recognize me and even removed me from the meeting." Han Ting's friend asks, "Are you acting like you don't recognize her because you don't want to involve her in all this? That's why you also removed her from the meeting?" Han Ting denies, saying, "It's been so long. She probably didn't even like me, so she didn't reply to my texts. His friend says, it's also possible that she didn't receive your message. Now at night, Han Ting messages Jixing saying, take care of the car repair. Jixing apologizes and asks, weren't your bosses late? Han Ting replies, no, my bosses are very easygoing. I will talk to them and get the car repair payment reduced, or they will forgive you. Jixing laughs and says, may your bosses remain rich like this. Han Ting smiles after reading this message. In the next scene, Han Ting is feeding the cat and thinking about Jixing, thinking, she also used to feed cats like this, and she had also adopted a cat. In the next scene, when Jixing arrives at the party, she looks very pretty. Then Han Ting arrives there with Zheng Di. Zheng Di asks him to give a speech. Han Ting says, Zheng Di and her company have always supported me, so I thank them. Seeing all this, Jixing thinks they know each other so well. Now Zhao comes to Jixing and says to her, drink wine. Then he asks, did you get the flowers? Jixing replies, yes. Zhao says, communicate the project further. But Han Ting comes and says, if she does this work, how will she manage the company's work? Zheng Di also supports his point, saying, you talk to Project Zoo. Now Han Ting gets some work, so he is about to leave. He sees Jixing near a modern robot and starts talking to her. Then Zheng Di also comes and says to Jixing, you look very pretty. Then she takes Han Ting inside. Afterward, Director Zhu stops Jixing and says to her, come to the sales department. You can handle clients well. Jixing refuses, saying, I have to go to the party. He grabs her from behind, which makes Jixing very angry. She angrily says, you cannot harass me like this. Then she talks about calling the police. Director Zhu blames her and starts leaving. Jixing grabs his arm to stop him, so he pushes her down. Jixing immediately calls the police. Then Han Ting is going for his work when he sees this matter. He says to his assistant, stay here and give me updates. When the police arrived, the CCTV footage was unclear, causing Director Zhu to happily blame Jixing. After hearing from his assistant, Han Ting gives him an idea. Then he goes to the police and says, there is a robot with a camera in it. I have asked my team to retrieve the footage. Looking at Zhu, he says, if you harassed her, confess now. Otherwise, everything will be revealed after the video arrives. Hearing this, Zhu confesses out of fear. Now Zheng Di comes and consoles Jixing. Jixing says, thank you, and leaves. At night, Jixing remembers that this was the same secretary who had helped her before. She messages him, thanks. Han Ting sends her a voice message and says, there's no need for all this. Jixing asks, are you the assistant? Han Ting denies, saying, I am Han Ting. Hearing this, Jixing is shocked. Next day, at the office, nobody talks to her. Her colleague calls her to the bathroom and says, everyone is saying bad things about you. Jixing sadly says, I was harassed, so why are people saying bad things about me? She becomes sad. Now Zheng Di overhears someone saying, Han Ting helped Jixing. Are they a couple? Afterward, Zheng Di researches and, seeing their pictures, guesses that they are university fellows. She feels jealous. Then, an employee is told to give Jixing double the work. Jixing is leaving after working late at night when she sees it is raining outside. Now Han Ting also comes down from his office. They are both in the same elevator. Jixing thanks him. Because of your plan, Zhu confessed his crime. Han Ting says, there's no need for that. Now downstairs, because of the rain, Han Ting says to her, shall I drop you? But Jixing refuses and says, I have hired a taxi. After she leaves, Han Ting also leaves. In the taxi, the driver was listening to the radio where the news of her harassment was playing. The driver starts talking against her. Jixing angrily gets out of the taxi. Then Han Ting arrives in his car and gives her a lift. He says, even after 10 years, you haven't changed. Jixing looks at him and asks, do you remember me? Next scene, Jixing resigns from the company, throws her card there, and leaves. Han Ting sees all this and watches her leave. Jixing looks very sad, making him understand that she has quit her job. Afterward, Jixing tells Yi Chen about quitting her job on a call. Yi Chen supports her. Then Yi Chen's colleague comes to him and talks to him. After the colleague leaves, Yi Chen takes a ring from his bag, which he had bought to propose to Jixing. He smiles, looking at the ring. In the next scene, she is eating with her friends when she receives a message from the company, go to the village. Because her resignation process wasn't complete, she was given this assignment. The next day, as soon as Jixing gets off the bus and arrives in the village, she meets Han Ting there. He takes her luggage and says, I will go with you. On the way, they talk. He says, you came to work even after resigning? She says, I committed. I will work even in my last days. Now Han Ting asks her to join his company, but she says, I don't understand anything right now. Now they use robots to help check on people there. Later, at the guest house where Jising is staying, an old lady whom Jising had helped a lot brings many things for her. At night, Jising is near the seaside, thinking about Jizhou's statement about whether she should work with him or not. Then Han Ting comes there and asks her, "Why did you come here?" She says, "I came for fresh air." Then she says, "This sky makes us feel so small." He says, "There's no harm in being small when you're living a meaningful life." She asks in surprise, "Those were my lines, which I said while receiving a prize at university." He says, "I also remember how happy you were receiving the prize, and I kept watching you. When we move forward, we forget our dreams, but only those who stay connected to their dreams can achieve something." So Jixing says, "Now I understand. My dream was to help people." Now Han Ting tells her to work hard and go back to the guest house. As soon as Jixing leaves the village, she goes to Jizhou and says, "I will work with you." Jizhou is happy. In the next scene, Han Ting is playing basketball with his assistant when he receives a call from Jixing. She says, "I won't work with them because I'm thinking of starting my own work." As soon as Jixing comes toward home, Yi Chen is waiting for her outside. She hugs him and welcomes him. Yi Chen says, "I thought you would be sad about quitting your job." She tells him, "I'm going to start my own work." Yi Chen suddenly falls silent, then says, "I will fully support your decision." Now at night, Yi Chen is making dinner. Jixing's friends have come. He was going to propose to Jixing today. Jixing talks about her business, so Yi Chen suddenly changes his decision. Her friends say, "What if you are unsuccessful in this?" She says, "Even then, I want to try once." Yi Chen says, "I'm with you." Yi Chen gives her his card so she can invest in her business. Her friends say, "You're very lucky to have a boyfriend like Yi Chen." Later, when Yi Chen is washing dishes, his friend asks him, "Are you really supporting Jixing?" He says, "Yes, I know her nature. She won't back down until she experiences it. That's why I'm letting her do this." Jixing overhears this and sadly puts his card in his coat. In the next scene, Jixing comes out of the office with her belongings and orders a strawberry cake for herself. Han Ting comes and asks her, "Are you in a bad mood? Because when your mood is bad, you do this." Then he asks about her work. She starts telling him about her work and asks him for advice. After telling him everything, she says, "I came to see how you do all this." She says, "When you went to Germany, you didn't know the language there, right? But you learned it after being in the environment there. Similarly, I will also learn quickly." And then she leaves. Afterward, Jixing is at a place with Jizhou. He tells her, "We will start our work here." Then they go inside and check. Jixing gives him her savings, but he says, "My dad has given me a surprise, which will be in a letter here." When he reads the letter, his dad has written, "I can't give you anything else besides this place. I'm giving you this place. Start your work from this. If you fail, come and help me with my work." Now he starts walking angrily. Jixing gives him her card. Now they clean the place well and set it up. Afterward, they are going to investors for their work, but he doesn't find any interested investors. The next day, Jizhou tells her, "We can't even buy a painting machine right now." Then she receives a call from Han Ting's assistant. He tells her he met Han Ting yesterday. Jixing doesn't want to go, but Jizhou says we can talk to him about investment. So she messages the assistant to meet. Now the next day, they are sitting in Han Ting's office. Then Han Ting arrives. Jizhou says, "I can't believe you have our proposal." He says, "You guys have worked hard in all this. How can I stay behind?" Jixing says, "I read your comments on our proposal. We have the talent. We just need investment." But Han Ting tells them to start their project right there. Jixing says, "What is lacking in our proposal?" He says, "You have talent but no channel. If you bring your product, how will you sell it?" Jixing thanks him for telling her all this. Coming out, Jizhou says to her, "We could have worked under him." But she says, "No, we won't work under anyone. This project he gave us was just a trick." In the next scene, Han Ting has come on a blind date with his relative, where he goes out to talk on the phone. Then Jixing sees him there. He asks her, "Did you come for lunch?" She says, "No, I came to meet an investor." Now they both start going towards the same room. Jixing thinks he's following her, so she tells him to go ahead. He goes ahead and opens the door of the room where Jixing's friend's blind date was. Now she smiles and sits inside. Now her friends are telling Han Ting that he is Jixing's investor. Han Ting says, "If you need anything, you can tell me." Now her friends ask her to add Han Ting on WeChat, so she has to add him. In the next scene, Yi Chen comes to Jixing's office. Jixing is very happy to see him. Then while going home from there, Yi Chen tells her, "Our relationship anniversary is coming." But as soon as he looks at Jixing, he sees her asleep, so he becomes sad. Now, after coming home, She wakes up and tells Yi Chen to go home and says, "We will go to the opera on our anniversary." Yi Chen becomes happy. Now in the next scene, Yi Chen brings flowers for Jixing and wishes her anniversary. Afterward, they have come to the opera, where Han Ting and Zheng Di are also present. Yi Chen was buying cinema tickets, so they come to them. Zheng Di asks Jixing, "Who is this?" She says, "This is my boyfriend, and we have been in a relationship for 5 years." Afterward, they go to see the play, where Han Ting was sitting a little away from Jixing. He was feeling jealous seeing Jixing with someone else. Now Jixing receives a call from Ji Zhou, who tells her, "We can get a printer on rent, but we have to deal with it now." Jixing says, "I'm coming now." Then she tells Yi Chen and leaves, but Yi Chen becomes a little sad. Afterward, Jixing and Ji Zhou meet with the printer guy. He was also demanding more deposit. Now they both decide that they will pay him half the payment, and the rest of the payment will be made when the printer is received. At night, Jixing comes to Yi Chen's house. She has brought some dishes for him. Now Yi Chen proposes to her. Jixing is very happy, but she tells him, "I will propose to you again after I am established," and keeps his ring with her. In the next scene, Ji Zhou goes to the printer guy, but he has scammed them and run away. Now he comes and tells Jixing everything. Now one of their employees is leaving after resigning because she didn't get work. Then Jixing faints. On the other hand, Ji Zhou is showing his project to Han Ting and trying to get him to agree to invest. Then he finds out from a phone call that Jixing has fainted. Now they both go to the hospital, where the doctor says she fainted due to stress. Now Ji Zhou tells Han Ting about the fraud that happened to them and asks Han Ting to invest with them. But he says, "Get Jixing to agree to work in our company." In the next scene, Han Ting's cousin invites Jixing to a meeting and tells her, "I will invest 20 million. But because her conditions are hard, Jixing refuses to work with her. Now Han Ting comes to her and offers her investment. She sets some conditions, which Han Ting accepts. The next day, Yi Chen comes from his hometown. Jixing goes to receive him. He is also wearing Jixing's ring. She tells him the news of getting an investor. Afterward, she goes to Han Ting and signs the contract. But Han Ting becomes sad seeing the ring on her finger. The next day, Han Ting sends Jixing the investment payment. She becomes happy. In the evening, Jixing is planning to propose to Yi Chen. Then Yi Chen arrives there. They both spend a lot of time together. Then they watch a movie together. After Jixing falls asleep, Yi Chen sees her plan on her laptop and becomes sad. The next day, Yi Chen makes breakfast for her. After having breakfast, Jixing hugs Yi Chen and starts to leave. He tells her that he wants to break up. Jixing becomes confused and leaves her ring on the table. She cries a lot while going in the taxi. She also waits in the meeting hoping that Yi Chen might message her, but it doesn't happen. Now after the meeting, she goes to Yi Chen's house, talks again, and checks his house. Yi Chen says, "There is no one else in my life." She starts crying, so Yi Chen hugs her. She says to him, "Can't you wait a little?" He refuses, saying, "I want to live a simple life with my partner, but you want to fulfill your dreams in your life, so we should go our separate ways." Now Jixing sadly leaves from there. Afterward, Jixing is drinking at a bar. Now Han Ting also comes and sits there. Now Jixing gets drunk and falls down, so Han Ting picks her up and takes her home. In the car, Jixing repeatedly leans against the window, so Han Ting puts his hand on the window. Afterward, Jixing rests her head on Han Ting's shoulder. Han Ting takes her home and lays Jixing on her bed. As he's about to leave, Jixing grabs his leg. He says, "Can we be friends?" She says, "I'll go to the market." Han Ting gives Jixing water. Then noticing she's cold, he sees her coat on the chair. He tries to lift it with the umbrella, but he can't. He pulls the chair closer and lifts the coat to cover Jixing. Jixing grabs his hand and says, "Don't leave me. I'll even quit the company for you. Don't break up with me." Han Ting refuses. She cries loudly, holds his hand, and falls asleep. When her friend arrives, Han Ting is sitting at the table and gently removes his hand from hers. As he gets up, his legs are numb. He can't even walk. He tells Jixing's friend, "Take care of her," and leaves. The next day, when Jixing wakes up, her friends are there. They ask her, "Do you remember what you did yesterday?" She says, "I only remember that I was drinking at the bar. After that, I don't remember how I got home." Her friend says, "Han Ting took you home, and you bothered him a lot." Hearing all this, Jixing is very embarrassed. Her friends ask her why she drank so much. She says, "I broke up with Yi Chen," and then sadly goes into the room. Going into the room, she looks at her chat with Yi Chen. Then she receives a message from Han Ting. He tells her about a new project and says, "Have breakfast." Afterward, Jixing focuses on her work and works very hard. In the next scene, Jixing comes to Han Ting with the project documents. Han Ting says to her, "Finally, you came." I thought you didn't need the company. Jixing says embarrassedly, I was drunk that day. He says, only when drunk do people's inner feelings come out. He now tells her to improve her mood and says, don't let your weight fall below 45 kilograms. Otherwise, I will start thinking about giving you the next payment. Jixing thinks, are these also the demands of investors? Now she gives Han Ting the documents. So Han Ting asks her to have dinner together, but Jixing refuses and leaves. Afterward, when she comes home, her mom has come home and made many dishes for her. She asks Jixing, why didn't you tell me about your breakup and starting the company? You're facing all the problems alone. She asks her to share her problems. Jixing agrees. After that, they both have dinner. At night, she receives a call from Han Ting. He tells her, I will come to the company tomorrow. There are some points to discuss. Jixing agrees. The next day, he arrives at Jixing's office with some soup and snacks. There, he sees a lady who tells him, I am Jixing's mom. She brings him inside, mistaking him for Yi Chen. She asks him to wash the strawberries. As soon as he opens the tap, there is a water leakage, which wets his dress because the tap is broken. Now, mom gives him a shirt to wear for Jixing. When Jixing arrives, Han Ting has fixed the tap. She is surprised to see Han Ting and says, Han Ting! Mom says, I thought this was Yi Chen, and he didn't tell me either. Jixing says, Mom, you wouldn't have given him a chance to tell you? Afterward, Han Ting tells her about some points. Then Mom asks Han Ting to have lunch together. Mom says to him, you must be very busy so you don't get time to eat with your parents. He sadly says, my parents are deceased. Jixing is very happy eating the dish she brought for Han Ting. Mom invites him to her house and also shows Jixing's childhood picture, seeing which Han Ting starts smiling. After finishing their work, Han Ting drops them home. Jixing asks him, I didn't think you knew how to fix a tap. He says, I lived abroad for a long time, so I know everything. Referring to the shirt he's wearing, Jixing's shirt, he says, I will get it washed and give it back. Jixing starts smiling. The next day, Jixing is taking her mom home. Her mom tells her to come home during the summer festival holidays and also Han Ting. She says, he is more mature than his age. Bring him home too. In the next scene, Jixing talks about the printer with Han Ting's assistant. He tells her to talk to Han Ting, but she says, you can also do this work yourself. Then he plays Han Ting's voice for her. He was listening to their whole conversation. He tells her to come to the office. When she comes to Han Ting's office, he says to her, you could have talked directly. I will help you. She says, can you get us a printer? He says, if you increase my shares, I can. Jixing refuses and leaves. Coming out, she tells her friend Lily to look at the printer. The next day, they both come with Lily to see the printer. There were many printers. Jixing tells the manager, I need a printer. He says, the printer will be delivered in 6 months. Jixing says, we need a printer quickly. He says, all the printers here are booked, so he cannot give them. While leaving, Lily tells Jixing, we'll have to ask for a printer from Han Ting's company. Hearing this, the manager takes Han Ting's company's name. She says, yes, we are working with them. Now he asks them to wait and says he'll talk to his boss. After a while, he comes and says, your printer will be delivered soon. Now Jixing gets a call, so she goes outside to talk. From behind, Lily tells the manager, can they get a discount? He refuses. Lily tells him, Han Ting is Jixing's classmate and he has also invested in Jixing's company. Don't share this with anyone. Now Jixing comes back. The manager agrees to give them a 5% discount. When they were leaving, Jixing receives a message from Han Ting. He asks her about the printer. She tells him, the printer is arranged. He asks, how? Jixing says, it's a secret. Han Ting starts smiling. In the next scene, Jixing is at Mr. Lin's dinner with Lily. He says to her, I didn't know you were so close to Han Ting. He asks Jixing to introduce herself to Han Ting. Now Han Ting and Zheng Di are also listening to all this in the next room. Jixing comes out pretending to go to the washroom. Han Ting takes her aside and says, you took the printer using my name. How did you feel doing that? I thought you were a hardworking girl, but you want to take shortcuts. Jixing says, I only told them that he was my schoolmate. They misunderstood. Han Ting says, you gave them the wrong idea. Now they will think we are having an affair. So let me make it true. He's about to kiss Jixing, but she moves aside and starts crying. Han Ting says to her, I just joked with you. Did it upset you? When people say such things, you will face them. He forbids her from taking such shortcuts because the price of shortcuts is very high, which you cannot bear, and then leaves. Now Jixing texts Mr. Lin that she has no relation with Han Ting, so she cannot help them. Now Mr. Lin calls her saying, Han Ting's assistant told us that he invested with you after seeing your hard work. We are sorry for misunderstanding you. We will continue to cooperate with you like this." Ji Xing happily thanks them. The next day, Ji Xing messages Han Ting that, "I have learned my lesson. I will never use your name again." Han Ting is with his grandpa. His grandpa asks him about Ji Xing. "Do you like her?" Han Ting says, "But I haven't told her yet." Grandpa says, "I want a life partner for you who knows how to face hardships. So I give you 2 years. And if Ji Xing improves, it's fine. Otherwise, you will have to marry the girl of my choice." In the next scene, Han Ting calls Ji Xing for a meeting, but Ji Xing has to go somewhere else. So she asks Ji Zhou to go to Han Ting in her place. Ji Zhou fearfully says, "If Han asks me about you, what will I say?" Ji Xing says, "Pretend I'm sick." Now Han Ting is waiting for Ji Xing, but Ji Zhou comes there and tells him the project details. Han Ting behaves very coldly with him and tells him to complete the project in 3 months. Ji Zhou says, "We lack people, so it's not possible." Han Ting says, "That's why I sent you here." Ji Zhou says, "No, she is sick." Han Ting doesn't believe him, so Ji Zhou has to tell him, "Ji Xing has gone to meet Dr. Li." Now Han Ting goes to the hospital where Ji Xing was waiting to meet the doctor. Han Ting calls her, so she starts acting like she's coughing. Han Ting comes to her and says, "You've caught a cold." Ji Xing is shocked to see him, so he says, "You came to meet Dr. Li." Now Dr. Li asks Han Ting to come to her office, so he tells Ji Xing to wait there and goes inside. Now she goes to the washroom. Han Ting doesn't see her outside. Then she comes and tells him, "I went to the washroom." Han Ting asks her to have dinner together in the evening, so she agrees. In the next scene, Ji Xing is at the same club with Han Ting where she once was with Zheng Di. Han Ting takes her to a room where some people are already present, including Dr. Li. Now food gets on Ji Xing's hands, so Han Ting gives her a tissue. Then he tells everyone about Ji Xing's qualities. Han Ting says, "I wanted her to work in my company, but she's very stubborn. She started her own work, so I had to invest in it." He asks everyone else to help Ji Xing. Now after dinner, Han Ting sees Ji Xing after dismissing everyone else. Ji Xing says, "How quickly time passed. The last time I was here, you made me leave." Han Ting says, "Zheng Di didn't bring you to introduce the project, but she brought you to serve people at the party. That's why I told Zheng Di to let you go." Ji Xing says, "So she had such intentions?" Han Ting says, "That's why I had to do that, and you misunderstood me." Ji Xing says, "No, I know you are a good person." Now he drops her home, so she thanks him for introducing her to those people today. In the next scene, she asks all her friends to celebrate New Year at her home. Then she talks to her parents on the roof and says, "I won't be able to come home because I have to work." As soon as she ends the call, Han Ting arrives there. He gifts her a painting, so she says, "I will put it in a good place." Han Ting is with his grandpa. His grandpa asks him, "When are you going home?" He says, "I have some work. I will go afterward." Then Han Ting leaves. The next day, Han Ting goes to celebrate New Year with his grandpa. He receives a call from Ji Xing's mom who says, "We have come to your house, but you are not at home. Do you know where she is?" Han Ting says, "Wait at home. I'll bring Ji Xing." Now we see Ji Xing, who falls asleep while waiting for food. As soon as she opens her eyes, Han Ting is there. He asks her, "Why is your phone off?" She checks her phone. The battery was dead. Then she goes home with Han Ting and says to her parents, "Why didn't you tell me about coming?" Her dad says, "Your mom wanted to surprise you." Now they ask Han Ting to have dinner with them, and he agrees. Now Ji Xing's cat, whose name they both chose, is seen by Han Ting. Ji Xing says, "You still remembered this?" Now Han Ting is sitting with the cat. Ji Xing is also sitting next to him. So her mom says to her dad, "I like Han Ting very much. If he's with Ji Xing, it will be a very good couple." Dad says, "He is the CEO of the company, so we shouldn't think like that." Now while talking about the cat, their hands touch. Both are looking at each other with great affection. Then Ji Xing smiles and removes her hand. While having dinner, Dad takes Ye Chen's name, so Mom stops him. Ji Xing says, "I have moved on." Dad says, "Okay, you will definitely find your Mr. Right." Now Ji Xing says to Han Ting, "The dish you brought last time was very good. Next time, bring the same chef's dish." Han Ting says, "Okay, let me know whenever you feel like it." Now Mom tells Dad how caring Han Ting is with Ji Xing. Then after dinner, they tell them both to watch the fireworks. Then Ji Xing brings sweet potatoes from the road for herself and Han Ting. They are talking while eating. She tells him, "I loved this food during college time." He asks her, "Have you found a new office?" She says, "I liked one, but its rent was very high." Han Ting asks her to shift to his company. There is an office vacant there. Ji Xing happily thanks him. Han Ting asks her to complete the project on time. Then the fireworks start. Ji-Xing wishes, "May my company be successful." Han Ting says, "You wish even during fireworks?" She says, "Yes, they look like meteors." So now Han Ting wishes for her, "May all your wishes come true," and tells Ji-Xing, "You can call me just Han Ting instead of Mr. Han Ting in private." So she wishes him a happy new year, calling him Han Ting. The next day, Ji-Xing and Lily are standing outside Han Ting's company. Han Ting comes and asks, "Why didn't you go inside?" She says, "We are waiting for the other employees." Now Lily asks her to go inside with Han Ting. "I will bring the other members." Afterward, Ji-Xing comes inside with Han Ting. Han Ting gives her a health card. Now Ji-Xing puts the painting given by Han Ting in the new office, which Ji-Zhou sees and says, "This is very expensive. Rather, it's the last painting of this artist. If we sell it, all our problems will be solved." Hearing this, Ji-Xing is shocked. Lily says, "This is Han Ting's love for Ji-Xing." Ji-Xing tells her not to say that. There is no relationship between us. In the next scene, Ji-Xing invites Han Ting to the company meeting where she was telling all the new members to work in the company. Now after the meeting, Ji-Xing shows him her office and asks him about her meeting. He explains some things to her and leaves. In the next scene, Ji-Xing comes to Han Ting with her product documents. Ji-Xing's handwriting was also on them. Han Ting asks her about those lines. She tells him. Han says to her, "Thank goodness you didn't write the proposal by hand. Otherwise, you wouldn't have gotten any investment." Now he asks her about the raw materials. Ji-Xing says, "I'm arranging it." Han Ting says, "Do you need my help?" Ji-Xing says, "Will you help me?" Han Ting starts shaking his hand. Ji-Xing thinks he is fixing something, but he says, "If you give me 5% shares, I will help you." Ji-Xing refuses and leaves. In the next scene, Ji-Xing reports to Han Ting. They have received the raw materials. Then she comes out, and Han Ting sends her a link to business classes. She comes back and thanks Han Ting. "You gave me the opportunity to learn business, which will help me do even better." After that, a scene 6 months later is shown when Ji-Xing is taking her class. Then Han Ting comes there and, seeing her notes, asks, "Are these yours?" Ji-Xing is surprised to see him. Afterward, Han Ting goes to talk to the professor. Ji-Xing is standing outside sadly. Then Mr. Ma comes and says, "I didn't know you knew Han Ting." He gives her his business card and says, "Can I invite you to dinner a few days later?" Afterward, Han Ting comes there. So Ji-Xing says, "You're very impressive. There's no need to give your card. Your name is enough." He asks her about her classes, so Ji-Xing says, "I am getting a lot to learn here." She thanks Han Ting again. Han Ting says, "I'm hungry." Ji-Xing takes him to the college cafe. Han Ting says, "You treat me so little, and on top of that, you are feeding me this kind of food." Ji-Xing says, "This is the popular food here." While eating, she says, "When I received the prize in college, I gave a treat, but you didn't come." Han Ting says, "I texted you. I had to go to Germany, so I couldn't come." Ji-Xing remembers, "My phone was lost that day, so I didn't get Han Ting's message." Then she receives a call from Zhizhou. A printer malfunctioned while an employee was working on it, so it's not working. Ji-Xing gets worried. Now Han Ting is dropping her off at her company, where he asks her, "What will you do now?" Ji-Xing says, "First, I will complain to that company and get them to agree to the repair." Han Ting says, "What will you do with that employee? You haven't set disciplinary punishment in your company yet?" Ji-Xing asks him, "What would you do if you were in my place?" Han Ting says, "I would fire that employee." Ji-Xing says, "That's too much punishment. That employee is very good at work. What will happen to her by doing this?" Han Ting says, "If you don't deliver the product on time, our agreement may also be broken." Ji-Xing says, "I will find some solution." Zhizhou was talking to the printer company, but they say, "We cannot repair it before the day after tomorrow." Lily tells him not to worry too much and to talk to the employees. He goes to the employees and consoles them. "We will definitely find some solution." Then Ji-Xing arrives there. After Zhizhou explains everything, she asks him to come to her office. Then she asks Zhizhou, "What happened?" He says, "One worker was working alone on the printer." Ji-Xing says, "Do you even know that it was necessary to have 2 people at the printer at one time?" He says, "There was a default in the raw materials, so I took all the other workers with me." He calls himself responsible for it. Ji-Xing angrily says, "Zhizhou, you are the responsible one." She says, "We'll check with some other companies. Maybe we'll get some help." Afterward, Han Ting asks Ji-Xing, "Where are you?" She says, "In the office." Now we see a scene in Ji-Xing's office where an employee says, "The printer has started." Then Han Ting comes and gives Ji Xing a dish of food because they were working late at night. Ji Xing is sitting with Han Ting in the office eating the dish. Han Ting asks her about the printer, so she says, 2 employees have gone to another city to print our product, and our printer is also fixed, so there will be mostly no problem. Han Ting then talks about the punishment. What will be the effect on the employees if no action is taken? Ji Xing says, everyone makes mistakes, but that employee has corrected her mistake by fixing the printer. She also feels guilty because she broke the printer. Now if I fire her, what's the point? I want to give them shelter while achieving my dreams. Han Ting doesn't say anything else to her. After that, she gets back to work. A call comes from another employee. We have completed the printing and have decided to come here by flight. Now Ji Xing asks her employees to rest, but they refuse. We will all try more. Therefore, Ji Xing also starts working with them. Next day, Han Ting goes to meet Grandpa. He says, so you've become so busy solving the mess of Ji Xing's company that you don't have time to meet me. You should be ashamed. I didn't give you this company so you could do anything. Han Ting explains to him, the inspection results of the company will come at 5 p.m. Grandpa says, if they fail, you will have to cut the investment or hire a manager for them. Ji Xing receives a call from Lily. Our flight is delayed, so it will take time. Now Ji Xing decides to work on her printer. Afterward, we see Yuan sitting in Han Ting's office. She says, a manager will have to be put on Ji Xing's company. Han Ting looks at his watch and says, it's not 5 yet. Then Ji Xing comes there, gives him a report, and after looking at the samples says, the samples have been approved. Yuan is shocked. A flashback is shown here. Ji Xing says, we will work on our printer only. Then they take out the samples. Yuan, surprised, says to Ji Xing, you got lucky this time, but your luck won't always be with you. Ji Xing apologizes to them and says, it won't happen again. Yuan scolds her. Now Han Ting angrily calls his assistant and signs the documents for the next payment. Yuan leaves angrily with her documents. Seeing her documents, Ji Xing understands. She asks Han Ting, do you want to merge the investments? Han Ting ignores her and gives her an invitation to an AI trade fair. Seeing it, Ji Xing happily says, I tried very hard for this, but I never got an invitation. Han Ting tells her to use this opportunity properly. Now Ji Xing thanks him and leaves. Next, we see Ji Xing in a meeting with all the employees. She says, today's problem has been solved, but now we have to make some decisions. Now a worker stands up and says, I'm sorry, but Ji Xing blames everyone, including herself, and then tells them to deduct their and her salary as punishment, because I couldn't handle them. She says, now there will be some rules in the company which everyone has to follow, and there will be punishment for not following them. All the workers say, okay. After that, she tells them about the AI trading fair invitation. You can also participate in this. Then she tells them all to go home. Next scene, Ji Xing is at her home. She receives an email from Han Ting. I'm coming to the trade fair. She says, I'm completely ready. Han Ting says, okay, then we will meet after 3 days. Next scene, Ji Xing comes to a restaurant and says, I want spaghetti. Then Han Ting also sits in front of her and asks her, did you have fun coming here? She says, I came here on a tour, not on vacation. I was researching this in my room too. After that, we see Zheng Di coming to the same restaurant. Seeing them, she sits next to Han Ting and says, I knew you would meet me here. Then she says to Ji Xing, even though you have a new company, you are getting a chance to participate here. If a good investor is found, the company gets on track. Han Ting says, Ji Xing has come here on her abilities. Now Zheng Di says, our company is also participating here. She shows her stall and says, see, you were also our employee once. Ji Xing says, I had to leave the company in an unpleasant way, but now I think it was better for me. Now Zheng Di says to Han Ting, I suggested this restaurant to you when my company was new, and after connecting with you, we have come this far. Ji Xing gets up and says to Han Ting, I have work, and leaves. As soon as Ji Xing leaves, her spaghetti arrives. Zheng Di says, you still like this, just like we liked it before. Han Ting tells the waitress, pack this. Then he says to Zheng Di, Ji Xing is not your employee anymore, so don't talk about the past. She says, I was just talking. Then the waitress brings the packed spaghetti, and Han Ting leaves with it. Next scene, Han Ting brings spaghetti for her. While she's eating it, Han Ting says, Zheng Di was your boss, so you shouldn't have talked to her like that. Now she says, even if I don't say anything, she will do something or the other. Han Ting says, this can create more problems because she also told about the raw materials, which were delayed because of Zheng Di. Ji Xing is shocked. Now Han Ting tells her to control her emotions and leaves. Evening. We see a scene of the AI trading fair. Han Ting is called for the opening speech. He delivers the speech very well. After that, there is a question and answer round, where everyone asks Han Ting questions. Now Ji-sing also raises her hand repeatedly, but he doesn't give her a chance. In the end, he says to her, "Your question?" Then he answers her question well. After that, he introduces Ji-sing in front of everyone. How I invested in Ji-sing's company and they do 3D printing. Now Ji-sing tells everyone about her products, and everyone is impressed by Ji-sing. Afterward, the exhibition scene is shown where Ji-sing's employees have also arrived, and Ji-sing is looking at the products of other companies. Then Han Ting arrives. She says to him, "Hanyai company is so fast. What will happen to us if we compete with our Agravan?" Han Ting tells her not to think too much. She says, "Will we really compete with them?" Han Ting says, "What do you think? Did I give my money for charity?" She starts smiling. Then Han Ting goes to talk on the phone. Ji-sing asks his assistant, "What is Han Ting's schedule?" His assistant tells him, "You have a meeting with Ji-sing." He quickly puts on his jacket, leaves to meet her, and calls her, "I will arrive in 10 minutes. Ji-sing looks at the time and thinks, Han Ting is coming. But Han Ting goes and sits in a different cafe. Now both are sitting in separate cafes. Han Ting thinks, did she leave? Now Ji-sing calls him. But Han Ting is also calling her, so their number is busy. Ji-sing's phone battery also dies. Han Ting asks the cafe owner, "Does this cafe have any other branches?" He says, "Yes, there is another cafe with this name here, which confuses people." Hearing this, Han Ting goes to that cafe. Now Ji-sing also finds out from a customer, there is another cafe with this name. She thinks, did Han Ting go there? She leaves quickly to go there. While running, she passes Han Ting, but Han Ting calls out to her. They both smile at each other. Han Ting says, "If you ever want to meet me, message me directly." Ji-sing says, "Okay." Both leave for dinner. Afterward, we see the opening ceremony of Lu Kai Bar, where many people have come. Han Ting also comes there. Lu takes him to a private room and orders a non-alcoholic drink for him. But Han Ting is about to leave when he learns that Ji-sing is coming there. So he sits upstairs and starts drinking. Lu smiles, seeing Han Ting. When Ji-sing arrives, Lu sends her to the private room where Han Ting sits on the sofa so Ji-sing can sit with him. But she sits in front of him. She asks him, "You don't drink. Why did you come to the bar?" Han Ting says, "I have also invested in this bar." Now the waiter brings strawberry juice for Ji-sing. Ji-sing says, "They know I like this." Han Ting says, "I ordered this for you. I remember you liked this in college." Ji-sing says, "I was stressed, so I used to drink this." Han Ting says, "Stress is good." Now Ji-sing, drinking juice, thinks, "What did I say?" Then she tells him, "I'm going on a trip to Germany." He asks her, "Why are you going?" Ji-sing says, "I want to study further so that I can grow my company better." Han Ting says, "This will be very good for you." Now they had nothing else to talk about except work, so Ji-sing says, "Let's play a game." Now both start playing a game, which Han Ting loses in the end. Ji-sing is very happy. Now Han Ting starts drinking the drink in the glass, which also gets on his lips. Ji-sing starts smiling, seeing him. Ji-sing tells Han Ting on a message, "We have a product meeting tomorrow, will you come?" Han Ting says, "You told me very quickly." She apologizes and says, "I'll tell you early next time." Han Ting says, "It will depend on my arrival." When she reaches the hospital, Lily tells her, Han Ting is talking to Ye Chen, so she goes directly to them. Ye Chen says, "Their product is very good." Ye Chen had to have surgery, so he says, "I'm sorry," and leaves. Han Ting asks her, "Did you ask him to do this?" Ji-sing says, "I only found out later that Ye Chen is that doctor's assistant. Now their product is tested." Ye Chen says, "We will cooperate with you further." Ji-sing is very happy. Now Ji-zhou asks Ye Chen to have lunch with everyone. Han Ting, feeling jealous, says, "Ye Chen will now have to observe the patient so he won't have time." Ye Chen says, "That's right." So Han Ting asks Ji-sing to go for lunch. Afterward, we see Ji-sing giving Han Ting a report. She says, "The patient's condition is stable." Now Han Ting asks her, "What is he doing now?" Ji-sing doesn't understand what he's asking. She tells him, "I have signed up to go to Germany." Han Ting says, "That's a good answer." And then he asks her to send a picture of the cat as she leaves. Ji-sing is on a flight to Germany, but she is shocked to see Han Ting there. Then she goes and sits in her seat. Han Ting messages her, "After landing, I will drop you at the hotel." She says, "Okay." Now their flight has landed. Ji-sing fell asleep. When she wakes up, there's a pillow with a car on it near her neck. She goes and thanks Han Ting for giving me the pillow. He says, "Which hotel will you stay in?" She tells him. He says, "I will also stay there." Now they both start going to that hotel. Han Ting asks her about her trip. She shows him the manual. He starts cutting out the companies he doesn't like. After that, he was getting his passport scanned at the hotel. Ji-Xing says, "You look handsome in this passport photo." He starts smiling. She gets fresh and comes downstairs to go out for a walk, where Han Ting was waiting for her. Now both go out for a walk together. There were many pigeons at one place. She wanted to click their photos, but they kept flying away. Han Ting feeds them food. Ji-Xing clicks their picture. Now she starts clicking photos of a couple there. Han Ting stops her. "You cannot click photos here without permission." Now the couple comes to them and asks them to click their photos. Ji-Xing happily starts clicking their photos. When they're showing the lady the photos, the man asks Han Ting, "Is this your girlfriend?" He says, "Not yet." The man says, "She's very cute," and tells him to confess his feelings. Han Ting smiles. Now the couple leaves, saying gorgeous in German. Han Ting asks her, "Do you know what they said to you?" She says, "No." He tells her, "They called you gorgeous." She smiles and starts clicking photos of the pigeons, while Han Ting is clicking her photos. Ji-Xing also starts clicking his photos. Now both come near each other taking photos and are very happy. Afterward, Ji-Xing was buying many fridge magnets. Han Ting says, "Is your fridge that big?" She says, "I'm buying these for my friends." She gives him a beer magnet too. Ji-Xing was focusing on collecting information by going to different companies. Ji-Xing and Han Ting are in a restaurant. He asks her, "How was your research?" She says, "The bosses of the companies you told me to go to were very humble." She was looking at Han Ting. He says, "Do you want to say something?" She says, "I have 2 days left to go back. Can you show me the Dongyan base?" After thinking for a while, he says, "Okay, be ready tomorrow afternoon." He takes her to Dongyan and shows her all the research. After that, he brings her to the basketball court. He says, "When I was stressed, I used to come here and play." Now he gives Ji-Xing the ball and says, "Can you play?" She says, "No." He starts teaching her. She puts the ball in the basket. Both spend a good time. Both have dinner together. Ji-Xing says, "I want a drink." Seeing her drink, Han Ting says, "Don't get drunk like last time." She says, "When I'm happy, I don't get drunk." Han Ting starts smiling. While leaving, she asks him, "You stayed here for so many years? Didn't you have any relationship?" He says, "I stayed here for studies, and my life wasn't as colorful as yours because I couldn't give time to love anyone." Ji-Xing says, "Why do I feel like you're criticizing me?" He says, "Why do you feel that way?" Han Ting comes close to her. She's about to fall backward, so he catches her and asks, "What do you think of me?" She smiles and starts to leave. Han Ting presses the button for his floor. When Ji-Xing doesn't press any button, he says, "Do you want to go to my room?" Ji-Xing quickly presses the button. When Han Ting's floor arrives, he doesn't get off. He says, "I will drop you off at your floor." Ji-Xing blushes. He takes her to her room and asks, "What time are you leaving tomorrow?" "I will drop you at the airport." She says, "I will go with my classmates." She tells him the time she's leaving. He says, "Good night." Ji-Xing is very happy in her room. Han Ting removes his coat in his room. Then the doorbell rings. He's happy because maybe Ji-Xing has come, but Zeng is outside. Seeing her, he asks, "What are you doing here?" She says, "I came here because there was a university reunion. Come with me." He refuses, making an excuse of work. Han Ting also comes back. He puts the magnet on the fridge and texts Ji-Xing, "I'm back from Germany and coming to you." He's sitting there drinking water. Ji-Xing tells him about her new project. He's happy. While leaving, he asks her, "It's your birthday tomorrow. What are you doing?" She says, "How did you know it's my birthday?" He says, "I saw your documents." She says, "I will celebrate with my friends tomorrow." Han Ting says, "Okay," and leaves. At night, Han Ting wants to wish her at 12 o'clock. He types and keeps the message. When some time is left at 12 o'clock, he receives a call from Xiao. He says, "I'll talk to you later." He is very happy sending the message to Ji-Xing. When Ji-Xing wakes up, seeing Han Ting's message at 12 o'clock, she smiles and replies with thanks. She says, "It must have been hard for you to stay awake till 12 o'clock to wish me." Han Ting also smiles seeing her message. In the next scene, Ji-Xing's friends have decorated very well for her. Now her friends arrive with gifts. She sees Ye Chen hugging Qiuzi. A friend says to her, "Weren't you ashamed doing this?" Qiuzi says, "The person I love is with me. So what's the problem?" Her friend says, "That person was your best friend's boyfriend." Ye Chen says, "I approached her." Her friend tells Ye Chen to leave. It's Ji-Xing's birthday today, so she shouldn't see all this. But Ji-Xing sees everything from the window and is very sad. Now they go inside and pretend nothing happened. Then they celebrate the birthday. Ji-Xing was sad, but she was still smiling. She says to Qiuzi, I'm happy you're with Ye Chen. Then she tells everyone to eat cake and leaves. Lily also comes behind her outside. Ji Xing says, my blessings are with Ye Chen, but I didn't think his girlfriend would be choosy, so I need some time. Then she goes for a walk. Now Lily messages Xiao. He asks, the party ended so early? She says, a friend created trouble, so dinner ended early. He now calls Han Ting outside and asks him to go to Ji Xing. Now Ji Xing receives a call from Han Ting and he says, send me your location. Ji Xing sends him the location and waits there. Then Han Ting arrives there. Smiling, she gets into his car. He asks her about dinner. She says, it got cancelled because of a friend. Han Ting says, it shouldn't have happened since it's your birthday. Now he takes her to a club. Xiao tells Han Ting about the clients. I can't handle them. He tells Ji Xing, this club is Han Ting's, and he cooks, and someone has eaten his food but doesn't know he made it. He asks Ji Xing, can I take Han Ting for a while? She says, okay. Han Ting tells her to wait there. While Ji Xing is waiting, the waiter brings fruits and juice to her. Drinking it, she remembers some things Han Ting said. Han Ting is also smiling, looking at Ji Xing. After their meeting, Han Ting goes out. Ji Xing had gone to the washroom. Han Ting starts waiting outside her washroom. As soon as she comes out, Han Ting says sorry. I made you wait. Then looking at the time, he says, we still have time. He asks a waiter for a lighter to have a birthday wish sung for her. She gets a little emotional. After the wish, Han Ting asks her, what do you want to do? She says, I want to drink. Han Ting brings her a drink. While drinking, she sees the dice kept there. Han Ting says, do you want to play these? Ji Xing says, I'm very good at playing this. He says, why, so am I. Ji Xing says, if I win, you have to return 3% shares to me. Han Ting agrees. Ji Xing says, if I lose, you can ask me to do anything, Cory. Now they play the game. Ji Xing loses in the end. He asks her, what do you want? But he's just looking at her and wishes her and gifts her a necklace, which Ji Xing likes very much. So he puts it on her. Now it's getting late, so he talks about dropping her home. Ji Xing holds his hand and asks, if I had won, would you have returned the shares? He says, yes. Ji Xing says, then I will also fulfill my claim. Han Ting starts looking at her. Afterward, we see them both spending the night together. The next morning, when Ji Xing opens her eyes, she is on Han Ting's bed. Now she receives a message from Jizhou, and he writes, why haven't you come to the office yet? Remembering last night, she gets very embarrassed. She replies to Jizhou, I'm coming. She puts on her dress and picks up her heels to avoid Han Ting hearing her footsteps. Seeing Han Ting talking on the phone outside, she tries to leave secretly. But as soon as she opens the door, she bumps into Han Ting's assistant, who was coming to Han Ting. He smiles seeing her. Ji Xing says, I have to go, and leaves without putting on her shoes. Now the assistant goes inside and tells Han Ting, Ji Xing opened the door and had an emergency, so she left. After the assistant leaves, he checks his phone, but Ji Xing hadn't sent him any message. Ji Xing comes straight to the office. Lily asks her, where were you last night, and you didn't even change your dress? She says, I was at my friend's house. Lily says, besides us, who is your friend like that? She tells her, I was at Han Ting's house last night, but I don't understand what our relationship is. Lily says, are you his girlfriend? She says, he hasn't confessed yet that he likes me. Lily says, I already knew he liked you. She says, this feels a bit too fast. Lily says, if that's the case, take some time and go on a vacation. After coming to his office, Han Ting goes to Ji Xing's office. Jizhou tells him, Ji Xing has gone to her hometown. Ji Xing is on a flight, and Han Ting messages her, happy journey, seeing which she doesn't reply and reaches her parents' house, surprising them. They are also very happy to see her. Han Ting is waiting for Ji Xing's message. He wanted to message her himself, but remembering Xiao's words, he should be patient. He doesn't message her and puts the phone aside. Ji Xing was also remembering Han Ting seeing the necklace, and neither of them slept all night. A few days later, when Han Ting is in the office, his assistant tells him, Ji Xing is back, and the lady who had surgery has gone to meet her. Han Ting says, she hasn't told me the planned strategy yet. The assistant says, I'll ask them to give me a report now. Ji Xing has come to meet the lady who had surgery. Her husband asks Ji Xing, I have a problem with my legs, so when can my wife go to work in the fields? Ji Xing is shocked and starts looking at him. Afterward, in the office, Jizhou, looking at the report, says, you can brief Han Ting directly. Ji Xing says, brief Han Ting. He refuses. Ji Xing shows him an invitation to a medical forum and says, go there again and give a speech. Hearing this, he refuses and says, I will brief Han Ting. Ji Xing smiles seeing him because she was still avoiding Han Ting. When Jizhou goes there, Han Ting, looking at the report, says, "This is all the best," and asks about Ji Xing. He says she's preparing a speech for the medical forum. After Ji Zhou leaves, Han Ting calls the assistant and asks about the medical forum. He says, "I refused them." Han Ting is disappointed, but the assistant says, "The manager there still wants to call you there, so I'll say we're coming." At night, Ji Xing, writing her speech, is watching Han Ting's speech video. She starts remembering the moments she spent with him. She gets embarrassed, then lovingly looks at Han Ting. The next day, when she arrives at the medical forum, Han Ting is already there. She says, "What are you doing here?" He says, "Why can't I come here?" and looks at her neck because she isn't wearing his necklace. He asks Ji Xing about the speech, and after reading her speech, he says, "It's good, but the style is like mine." Ji Xing takes her speech back from him. Han Ting tells her to deliver the speech seriously and wholeheartedly. While leaving, he asks her to have dinner together, which Ji Xing agrees to. In the next scene, we see Ji Xing giving her speech. Hearing her speech, many people praise her. Han Ting was also listening to her speech very attentively, and both smile at each other. Afterward, they were going for dinner, and Han Ting asks her, "How did you feel about your speech?" She says, "It was good." She asks him, "How did you like it?" He says, "Excellent." After that, Ji Xing asks him to advise her about the report. He says, "If you need advice, report to me yourself." Now they come to dinner where many people have come. After eating, they drink wine, and they ask Ji Xing to drink too. Ji Xing drinks a little. They ask her to drink more, but Han Ting stops them. "Because she is a lady, so you should respect her." A man asks Han Ting to drink with him, so he drinks himself, but Han Ting doesn't drink. She's about to drink in Ji Xing's place, but Han Ting picks up the drink and drinks it, and then leaves with Ji Xing. Reaching the car, he takes his energy medicine, but his condition is getting worse. Ji Xing asks him to go to the hospital, but he refuses. Then Ji Xing receives a call from Ji Zhou. He tells her about some problem. Han Ting goes to the hospital with her. Going there, they find out that the lady's disc has been located, and it cannot happen due to a fall. Ji Xing and Lily go to talk to her, and she wants to tell them something but can't. She tells her, "You have to follow the doctor's advice. Only then can you get well." Coming out, she sees Han Ting waiting for her. Lily leaves after telling Han Ting to drop Ji Xing. In the car, Ji Xing asks Han Ting about his health. He says, "I'm fine now." Han Ting comes to drop her home. As soon as she starts opening the door, he closes it and asks, "Why are you avoiding her, and why isn't she wearing his necklace? Didn't she like it?" Ji Xing says, "That's not true." He says, "You're not wearing it because after that, the meaning of our relationship will change." She says, "I don't understand what our relationship is." Han Ting gets closer to her and asks, "What do you think?" Ji Xing's friend opens the door from inside and is surprised to see them like that. Ji Xing goes inside without saying anything. Then Han Ting leaves. The next day, the lady is protesting outside Dongyan Company with her husband and some people. Ji Xing asks Ye Chen about this, and he says, "She has surgery, but she is missing from the hospital." Ye Chen says, "This surgery is very important for her." Ji Xing goes out and asks the lady to have surgery, but her husband says, "Until you people give them money, we won't go anywhere." Ji Xing says, "There's no defect in our product." Now Han Ting also comes to know about this problem, so he also starts going there. There, they are demanding compensation from them. A man touches Ji Zhou and falls down, showing that Ji Zhou hit him. A lot of trouble is created there. Ji Xing loses her balance and falls while trying to control everyone. Han Ting rushes to help her up and takes control of the situation. Han Ting takes Ji Xing with him. She says, "It's not our fault, so why should we pay compensation?" But Han Ting tells her to handle the matter his way. He takes her home and applies ointment to her hand. She tells him to apply it gently because it was hurting. Han Ting puts a bandage on it. Then Ji Xing's stomach rumbles. He asks her, "Are you hungry?" She says, "Yes." So he goes to make food for her. Han Ting's assistant settles the matter by giving the man money, but someone records a video of it. Han Ting's assistant tells him that the matter is solved and sends him the picture. Han Ting looks at Ji Xing. Then he sets out all the dishes. He had cooked very well. Ji Xing likes the food very much. She thanks him. Han Ting says to her, "Do you only want to please me with words?" She says, "I accept." Han Ting says, "But I haven't said anything yet." Then he says to her, "Will you be my girlfriend?" Ji Xing says yes, and then they kiss. At night, Han Ting is working, and Ji Xing comes to him. "What are girls' slippers and a bathtub doing here?" He says, "I had arranged them for you beforehand." Ji Xing smiles, and seeing him write, says, "Your handwriting is very good." He asks her to write her name near him because her writing isn't good. Now Ji Xing writes Han Ting's name along with her name. He asks her, "Did you?" She says, I wanted to see how our names look together. Han Ting says, not just our names, we both will also be together. The next day, when Jixing wakes up, Han Ting was sleeping with her. Smiling, she starts looking at him. She wishes him, good morning, boyfriend. Han Ting hugs her. Now they both get ready, have breakfast, and go to the company. Afterward, Jizhou tells Jixing about the video. Someone had recorded a video of Han Ting's assistant giving money. The same thing was going on social media, that Xingqiang was doing all this to hide his mistakes, and Dongyan was supporting them. People were posting bad comments. She goes to Han Ting and says, who is doing this? He says, those who are benefiting from it. Then Han Ting goes to the board meeting. He asks Grandpa for 3 days to fix everything. He gives him time. The next day, Jixing goes to the lady's house where she hears her talking to her husband. She starts recording their video. The lady was telling her husband, I had already told you not to ask for such money. He says, I have already spent the previous money. More money will come from Han Ting. Now his wife says, the problem with my hand didn't happen because of a defect in the product. It happened because you asked me what you did. On the other hand, Han Ting's assistant reports to him that the lady's condition was due to her husband's death. He immediately goes out. Here Jixing tells them, I have recorded all this. Now you won't be saved. The man comes to Jixing to hit her. Then Han Ting arrives and hugs her. She says, I have recorded the evidence on my phone. Han Ting tells her not to take such risks next time and just has the man arrested. Now Han Ting shows that video to everyone and says, now the problem is solved. Jixing messages him later. Are you free today? I want to take you somewhere. Han Ting says, I will come to pick you up, but Jixing sends him the location. When Han Ting arrives there, Jixing is looking at the stars. She asks him to look at the stars through the telescope. Han Ting looks at a bright star. Jixing shows him a certificate that this star has now been named. She says, when I came to this city, I was very stressed. But seeing these stars, all my tension went away. And it's also very romantic because you are with me now. Now they both kiss each other and say, I love you. In the next scene, Jixing sees Han Ting with Zheng Di and sadly leaves. While Han Ting is returning Zheng Di's shares, Jixing's dinner with Yechen ended. She had drunk. Yechen asks her to drop her home, but she refuses. Then Han Ting comes and says, I will drop her. After he leaves, Han Ting asks her, why did you drink so much? She angrily says, you also had lunch with Zheng Di. Did I ask you anything? Now Han Ting asks her to sit in the car, but she says, I will go by taxi. But Han Ting wants her not to go alone like this, so he gets out of his car, and his assistant takes Jixing home. In the next scene, Jixing is telling the cat about Han Ting not messaging her when there's a knock on the door. She thinks her friend has come. When she opens the door, Han Ting is outside. She asks him to come in, then acts busy in her room. Han Ting says, okay, then I'm going. Jixing hears the door close and comes out to check if he really left. But Han Ting is sitting outside. He comes to her and says, I came to appease my angry girlfriend. She says, why did you have lunch with Zheng Di? He says, I was returning her shares. I went to tell her. Jixing hugs him. Afterward, Han Ting puts his location on her phone. This way, you will know where I am. He starts kissing her when she feels someone is in the house. She says, there is no one in the house. He picks her up and takes her to the room. After that, he's getting Jixing's things packed to take them to his house because they were going to live together now. Reaching home, Han Ting asks her to open the door. She asks him for the password, and he tells her his birthday, making Jixing very happy. Going inside, she sets all her things. Han Ting cooks for her, and Jixing says, we are going to fight a lot in the future. He says, it's okay. I will shut your mouth with food. The next day, both were going to the office. She says, I can't believe we're going together. He says, then we won't go? Jixing kisses him and says, everyone else can go. But Han Ting picks her up. We are the bosses. We can be late too. Then he takes her inside the house. In the next scene, Han Ting is looking at Jixing's profile picture. It was the picture he had clicked of her in Germany. After that, he also puts his Germany picture, which Jixing had clicked. After that, Han Ting messages Jixing, are you free? She says, yes. Then she comes to Han Ting's office. Han Ting picks her up, sits her on the table, and says, you've changed your lip color. She says, yes, how does it look? Kissing her, he says, everything looks good on you. Afterward, they are going home, and Jixing says to him, you look so good driving seriously. She starts clicking his pictures. Then Qiu Zi sends her a wedding invitation and a voice note. She is my very good friend, and I don't want to lose her, so I will definitely come to her wedding. Now she becomes a little sad. Han Ting asks her, do you want to go to the wedding? She says, yes. He says, I will also go with you. Arriving home, Han Ting was looking at his birthday photo. Ji Xing comes to him. He tells her, this is my 8th birthday picture. After that, my parents died. After that, I didn't celebrate any birthday. Ji Xing hugs him and says, I'm here for you. Now she's shocked to see a little girl in the background of the photo because it was Ji Xing. In her childhood, she had gone to the aquarium with her parents. She had taken 2 seal toys. Now Han Ting's mom comes to buy gifts for her son, but the seal toys were finished. Ji Xing gives them her toy. Han Ting's mom thanks her. The next day, she tells Han Ting to close his eyes. I will drive the car myself today. Then, in the car, Ji Xing asks him, don't you want to know where I'm taking you? He says, I trust you. Ji Xing says, when I started the company, I didn't know anything, but you guided me well. So now I'm not even afraid of falling. I can follow you with my eyes closed. Han Ting smiles and says, I won't let you fall. Now he takes her to the aquarium and to the place where her picture was. Opening her eyes, she shows him the childhood photo. He says, are you refreshing my childhood memory? She tells him, I gave you the toy you have, and I have already met your parents. So from today, your happiness is my responsibility. Han Ting hugs her. Then they buy seal toys. Afterward, Ji Xing asks him to go to the bar, but he says, I want to take you somewhere else. Han Ting takes her to a waffle shop. Seeing the waffles, Ji Xing says, this is so heavy, and I can't believe that the CEO of Dongyan eats waffles here. He says, this is my safe house. When my parents died, I was wandering alone after coming from school. When I stopped at this shop, the owner fed me free waffles, which were the tastiest waffles of my life. So whenever I'm sad, I come here and eat waffles. Ji Xing says, when I'm sad, I tell everyone. So now, whatever happens, you can share it with me. Han Ting says yes. After that, we see them both at home, where Ji Xing gives him her cards. Whenever you need something, you can ask me using these cards. Seeing this, he's also happy, and then they spend a lot of time together. After that, we see the wedding scene of Ye Chen and Chuzi, where all the friends have come. Han Ting is sitting holding Ji Xing's hand. When it's time to throw the bouquet, they both leave. Han Ting asks her, why didn't you stay to catch the bouquet? She says, I have both love and beauty. I have everything I need. He says, that's a good answer. Ji Xing says, do you think I'm sad? If we don't stay away from the wrong person, how will we meet the right one? Han Ting smiles and says, I want to spend my whole life with you. Ji Xing says, are you proposing to me? He says, I don't want our proposal anniversary to be on this day. She says, then when will you propose to me? He says, I can do it now. But Ji Xing refuses and sits down with him. In the next scene, we see Han Ting and Ji Xing in a car. He brings her to his grandpa's house. He says, I've brought you to meet them. She says, you should have told me earlier. Han Ting tells her to relax. I've arranged everything. He gives her a box containing earrings. Ji Xing is happy because these earrings match her necklace. When she puts them on, Han Ting says, I've met your parents, so I brought you to meet my grandpa so that whatever happens next, you won't regret it. When they go inside, they meet Lu's mom outside. She praises Ji Xing a lot. Grandpa also joins them for lunch. Yuan asks her, did you and Han Ting know each other from college? She says, yes. Yuan says, that's why Han Ting invested in your company. Ji Xing says, you offered me a job before Han Ting. If I hadn't accepted Han Ting's offer, I would be working under someone today. I would be working for you or for Han Ting. I am working for Dongyan. Han Ting supports her. After eating, Grandpa calls Ji Xing to his room where he is doing calligraphy. She says, your calligraphy is very good. Grandpa writes both her and Han Ting's names together. When they are going back, Ji Xing tells Han Ting, Grandpa wrote both their names together. That means he doesn't like me. She says, your grandpa's calligraphy is very good, and your handwriting is also good. Does it run in the genes? Han Ting teasingly says, if you practice with me for a few years, you will also get grandpa's genes. At first, Ji Xing doesn't understand. Then she understands he was talking about babies, and she starts blushing. The next day, Ji Xing is talking to her parents on a video call. She and Han Ting tell them about their relationship. They are very happy and invite them home. In the next scene, Ji Xing asks Han Ting, do you love me? He says, what is love in your eyes? She says, if I'm not here, you won't feel like living in this world either. Han Ting says, in my eyes, the meaning of love is a perfect match, and this is not a novel world. It takes time to be perfect. Ji Xing doesn't understand what he means, so she leaves in a bad mood. In the next scene, Ji Xing signs a contract with Han Ting's competitor, Chen. He asks her to invest in her company from a third party. When Han Ting finds out about this, he calls a board meeting. At night, Jixing comes home and Ming is very happy to see her. She was waiting for Han Ting's message, and Han Ting was also waiting for her message. Nobody takes any action. After that, we see a flashback showing that Han Ting had exchanged Jixing's shares with Chen in exchange for Zheng Di's shares. In the next scene, Jixing is coming to Han Ting's apartment. Han Ting was washing strawberries for her. Jixing tells him about Chen's investment. He says, "I knew this beforehand." She says, "Don't you want to ask why I did this?" Han Ting says, "You knew he is my competitor. Why did you take his help?" Jixing tells him about his investment in Hyundai, that he is our competitor, so you also invested there. Han Ting says, "Your company needed me, so I helped you. Now you can achieve success by merging with Hyundai." Now he shows her the document. "I have bought your company's shares from Chen." He says, "You could have come and told me. I could have done this much for our relationship." Now Jixing says to him, "Which relationship? Do you really love me? You're just using me." Han Ting angrily says to her, "I don't have that much time. Do you know why Chen wanted to invest in your company? Because Yuan wanted to harm me like this." Jixing says, "I thought you loved me, but you are a heartless person. You did all this for me because I am the right choice." He tries to explain to her, but she leaves with her things. She left his gift and the cat there. In the next scene, Jixing goes to her parents' house. They ask her about Han Ting, but she says, "He won't come because of a family problem." Now mom and dad understand her condition. After that, Han Ting becomes very sad. After New Year, Han Ting is waiting for Jixing to come, but Jai Zhou and Lily come and tell him she hasn't come back. After that, he emails all the company members to work well and charges Ji Zhou with running the company. Jixing messages, "Ji Zhou, I won't be able to continue." Now Han Ting also receives a letter from Jixing. She had written, "The world is very big. We won't meet each other again." Along with it was her resignation letter in which she had written the reason, "My dreams cannot be fulfilled after the merger, so I cannot continue." Han Ting is very sad and goes to a bar and drinks a lot, which makes him unwell. Jixing had gone to Germany. She goes to the places where she went with Han Ting. After that, she gets a job there and tries to move on. One day, she is feeding pigeons when a thief, Xin, is running away with a bag. Jixing helps him, so he thanks her. The next day, Jixing comes to the professor. There she sees Xing talking to the professor. He also recognizes her. The professor introduces her to Xing. "You both are from the AI field." He says, "Then we have become partners." Now they both exchange contacts. The next day, we see Jixing at the professor's place where she says to him, "I always get something to learn from you." He also praises her. "Your company is also going very far." She becomes happy. Now Xing comes there. He asks the professor, "Did you call me here?" Then seeing Jixing, he says, "You're here too?" She says, "I'm going back to China tomorrow, so I came to meet the professor beforehand." Xing tells the professor, "I will meet the person you want me to meet later." He goes out with Jixing. As soon as they leave, Han Ting comes there and asks the professor about Xing. He says, "One of my students is going back to China, so he went out with her." The professor asks him to talk to Xing. He is very talented. Han Ting is on a street in Germany, looking at pigeons. Then he hears Jixing's voice. Jixing appears, feeding pigeons. As soon as she sees Han Ting, her smile disappears. She looks at Han Ting in shock. Xing also sees Han Ting and says, "When did you come here?" Han Ting was only looking at Jixing. Xing says, "Do you both know each other?" Before Han Ting can say anything, Jixing says, "We were classmates." Xing says, "Oh, the professor wanted to introduce you to me?" Han Ting says, "Yes." Now he talks to him about the project. Xing says, "I will tell you about this after thinking." Then he receives a message. "There is a problem in the lab. I have to go." Jixing says, "I will also go with you." But Han Ting tells her, "I need to talk to you." Now they are walking and talking. He asks her, "When are you going to China?" She says, "Tomorrow." Han Ting asks about her next plan, but Jixing doesn't give him any answer. He asks her, "Are you still angry with me?" She says, "I understand about the merger. It was a good decision of yours. If you really loved me, you wouldn't have used my company." Han Ting says, "It was necessary to do that at that time. If you ask me about love, there's no one else in my life besides you." He says, "In my eyes, love is like a plant that grows every day." Jixing leaves without saying anything. The next day, when she is on the flight, Han Ting comes there, exchanges seats to sit next to her, and gives her a development strategy file. Jixing refuses to look at it, so he says, "You can look at it. You are a shareholder of your company. If you are not taking this opportunity because of me, It's wrong. Ji Xing says to him, if you've said what you had to say, you can go to your seat. But Han Ting acts thoughtfully. Ji Xing starts reading the file. Han Ting smiles, looking at her. Reaching China, Han Ting is about to drop her home. He shows her the cat's photos. Afterward, she is sitting with her friends eating when she gets an offer to become a vice president. Lily says, you should accept this offer. The next day, she goes to the office where she finds a notebook and cat photos in the new office. When she goes to the meeting, seeing Xing, she says, I knew you would accept Han Ting's offer. He offers her a movie. Then Han Ting comes and starts the meeting. He tells Ji Xing and Xing about the projects. After the meeting, Xing plays magic cards with Ji Xing. Ji Xing's card comes up, you have to have lunch with Xing. So she goes to have lunch with him. Han Ting was also watching them from the window. Xing asks her to go to a movie after lunch, but she refuses. I have to focus on my work now. The next day, Ji Xing's parents come to meet her. Ji Xing is busy, so they start waiting in her office. Her mom is very happy seeing her office. Dad says, Ji Xing has worked very hard to reach here. Now I want her to marry a good person. Mom says, we don't even know about Han Ting and his relationship. What's going on between them? Ji Xing comes and meets her parents. Then her dad says, we have to go to meet someone. They give her the things they brought and leave. After that, Ji Xing's parents go to meet Han Ting, where he tells them everything. It was my mistake. Now mom and dad say, we won't come between your love, but you have to think about the future. We can't see our daughter getting hurt again and again. The next day, Ji Xing had brought her parents to the beach, and they spend a good time. Before her parents leave, they tell her, we went to meet Han Ting and he told us everything. Ji Xing smiles and says, what did he say? Mom says, he said he's sorry. Her mom says, we just want to see you happy. Ji Xing, dropping them off at the car, says, I will solve the problems with Han Ting. In the next scene, Han Ting sends Ji Xing pictures of the cat and says, it's her birthday tomorrow, will you come? Ji Xing laughs and says, yes. The next day, he takes the cat to a garden. Ji Xing arrives there, happy to see the cat. She brought toys for it too. Now she is enjoying the cake Han Ting made. Ji Xing says to Han Ting, sorry, my parents went to meet you. He says, it's good. This way I got a chance to apologize to them too. I didn't want to hurt you. Then he starts taking pictures of her and the cat. After that, a scene of the medical forum is shown where Han Ting gives the opening speech. At the end, looking at Ji Xing, he says, I ask for another chance from my friend who showed me this path. After the medical forum, Ji Xing comes out and receives a card that says, give me another chance. Smiling, she calls him, but he doesn't answer. Now she calls his assistant. The assistant tells her he's coming back because of a problem in Dongyan. Ji Xing also packs her bags and leaves. On the flight, she receives a message from Han Ting. I had to come back early because of work. Otherwise, I would meet you at home. Ji Xing goes to his house where the house password was still her birthday. She goes inside and sees fishes in the fish tank. She's happy to see the cat. She goes to the fridge where Han Ting has put her tasks, and he has completed 9 tasks. She cries emotionally. The doorbell rings outside, so she goes to see, but someone kidnaps her. Han Ting comes back and sees that Ji Xing is not there. He calls her, but the kidnapper answers. The kidnapper says, if you want Ji Xing, you have to give me $5 million. If you try to inform the police, you know what will happen? Han Ting is immediately going to Azella. He calls his assistant and asks him to get the police there. Going there, the kidnapper sees Han Ting and says, where's the money? Han Ting tells him, it's in the car. You'll need a car to leave here too. Now, getting close to Han Ting, he starts attacking him with a knife. In the struggle, both fall down. Ji Xing is watching from above. The police arrive, and both are saved. In the hospital, Ye Chen sees Han Ting and says, there are no external injuries. Ji Xing arrives there. Han Ting asks her, are you all right? Ji Xing says, yes. She asks Ye Chen, and he says, she is fine now, just a fracture in her leg, which will heal in a few days. Ji Xing is lowering Han Ting's bed. He says, have you forgiven me? Ji Xing says, I had already forgiven you. But I don't understand how you know about me beforehand, but I don't know about you. I want to know everything about you, because if we stay together, I will love you even more. So it's necessary for me to know everything about you, and I want to stay with you. Han Ting wipes her tears and says, it was nice meeting you, Mrs. Han. Ji Xing smiles and says, Mr. Han, you are also very good. Then both kiss. In the next scene, Xiao has come to meet him. He says, I feel very bad seeing you. You look so weak. And Ji Xing, wherever she went, you took a beating for her and she left you. Han Ting says, all this happened because of me. Then Ji Xing arrives there. Xiao asks her to take care of Han Ting and feed him fruits. Ji Xing shows him the bag of fruits she brought with her. While they are washing the fruits, Xiao says, "Are you still acting weak? This way, Ji Xing will come close to you." Han Ting calls Ji Xing. "I'm feeling uncomfortable in my back." She comes close to him, and he kisses her. Xiao says, "I'm the brainless one. I'm just with both of you. I didn't understand." Then he says goodbye and leaves. Afterward, Ji Xing goes to Han Ting wearing a patient's clothes. Pulling her close, Han Ting says, "This is the last time we'll wear these." They both fall asleep together. In the next scene, Ji Xing tells Han Ting about his hospital discharge. Han Ting says, "You can stay at my house for a few days." She starts refusing, so he says, "I'm a patient, so I need you." Ji Xing agrees. Ji Xing brings Han Ting home from the hospital. Ji Xing says to him, "This fish's tail looks like a butterfly." Han Ting says, "They're called lucky fish, and I brought them because you'll come to me." She says, "Were you so confident?" Han Ting says, "No, I was going to wait for you." Then she says, "You completed all the tasks alone." He says, "I've liked you since school. Your phone was lost. Otherwise, our love story would have started long ago." Han Ting hugs and kisses her. Then both spend a good time. The next day, Han Ting makes breakfast for her. Ji Xing says, "Shall I help you?" He says, "I'll teach you." Now both start making breakfast. Then both go to the office where Ji Xing asks Han Ting to take good care of himself. When Han Ting goes to his office, he sees the flowers Ji Xing had kept and the cushions she had placed on the chair so that he would be comfortable. At night, Ji Xing is looking outside from the window when Han Ting brings the cat. Ji Xing says, "It doesn't seem like we are a family, and this cat is our naughty kid." Han Ting starts smiling. In the next scene, Ji Xing is working when Han Ting brings noodles for her and asks her to rest. She says, "I have some work. You go and rest." Now he brings a file and says, "I need your signature on this." When she opens the file, there's a kissing card inside. She kisses Han Ting. Han Ting says, "Just that?" She says, "You can only use one card once a day." Then seeing the massage card, he says, "My body aches." Ji Xing smiles and takes him to the room for a massage. The next day, when Ji Xing is in her room, Han Ting calls her to his room. When she goes there, Han Ting introduces her to an actress. "This is my girlfriend." Ji Xing tells her to get well soon and leaves. Han Ting tells her, "She was my friend." Afterward, they go for lunch. A car almost hits Ji Xing, but Han Ting pulls her towards him, causing pain in his spine. Ji Xing takes him to the hospital where the doctor says he needs surgery. Han Ting's grandfather arrives, and Ji Xing leaves. Grandpa tells Han Ting, "If you want to protect Ji Xing, protect yourself first. And I don't want anything to happen to the girl my grandson loves. So get well soon." In the next scene, their product is being criticized in the media. So Ji Xing calls a press conference and tests her products in front of everyone. The media says someone must have spread false news. Grandpa is also happy seeing that she handled the situation well. Ji Xing goes to the hospital where Han Ting's surgery was completed, but he was still unconscious. After a while, Han Ting wakes up, and Ji Xing is very happy. Afterward, Han Ting watches Ji Xing's press conference video and praises her. She says, "Don't watch it." Han Ting asks, "Why?" Ji Xing says, "Then you will love me even more." Han Ting smiles and says, "I already love you more." He asks Ji Xing to feed him oranges. She's feeding him when Grandpa arrives. They apologize for disturbing them. Then they thank Ji Xing for taking care of Han Ting and say, "For today too." And all this happened because of Han Ting. Ji Xing says, "We are a couple, and it's not Han Ting's fault." Grandpa says, "Last time I wrote both your names together. Take it. It's a gift." Ji Xing thanks him. "Chairman." They laugh and say, "You'll still call me chairman?" Ji Xing apologizes and talks to Grandpa. Then they leave, asking her to continue eating oranges. The next day, when Ji Xing comes to the hospital, Ye Chen tells her about Han Ting's discharge. "Because he won't be able to stand for long, you should use a wheelchair and he will recover in a month." After that, Ji Xing sits Han Ting in a wheelchair. He starts kissing her, but she doesn't let him. In the next scene, Han Ting comes to the office and makes Ji Xing the vice president. Now he conducts a meeting where he starts having pain while standing. Yuan and Ji Xing quickly finish the meeting. Then we see a scene a month later. Han Ting has recovered. Ji Xing is making soup for him and says, "You have to drink soup." Han Ting says, "I can't drink anymore." Ji Xing says, "We can't waste it." Han Ting gives her an idea. Then they play a game where the loser has to drink the soup. This way, they both drink the soup. In the next scene, Han Ting has come to Grandpa. They tell him to get married soon, "Because I want my great-grandchildren." Han Ting starts smiling. In the next scene, Han Ting and Ji Xing are going to meet her parents. Ji Xing says, "My parents gave you a tough time. Can you handle it?" Han Ting says, "Yes." Now they reach there. He has also brought gifts for Mom and Dad. Mom asks them to eat spicy food to erase those days. Dad has put a lot of spices in the dishes. They say, these are all Ji Xing's favorite dishes. When Han Ting eats them, his condition starts getting worse. Dad says, "You're not even eating her favorite food, so how can you stay together?" Han Ting apologizes for what happened earlier. "We will take decisions together in the future." Then Mom and Dad bring non-spicy dishes for Han Ting, and then they all enjoy dinner. The next day, they have to come back because of work. At night, Han Ting takes her to the rooftop. He says, "I didn't think I would love a girl so much." And then he shows her the marriage ring and proposes, "Will you be my wife?" Ji Xing says, "Yes." Then they both kiss. Next, they go to get their marriage certificate, where they take nice photos. He takes her to the road where they first met. Han Ting says to her, "I didn't ask you for compensation." Showing him the marriage certificate, she says, "But I have to give it to you today." Han Ting starts smiling. After that, we see them in Germany where they have a simple wedding and wander the German streets. They meet the same old couple who click their photos. After that, a scene a year later is shown where they are in a small house. Ji Xing says to Han Ting, "Grandpa says we should get a bigger house, and he also wants to see our great-grandchildren." She asks Han Ting, "Do you also want children?" Han Ting says, "When you're ready, we'll have babies." Ji Xing says, "Because of being busy, we don't have time for each other." Han Ting says, "I will take you for a ride tomorrow." She says, "No, I want to go to the bar where I will dress up and seduce you." Han Ting shows her his wedding ring and says, "I'm married." She says, "Is your wife as beautiful as me?" He picks her up and takes her inside. Then, after that, a scene 4 years later is shown when Ji Xing is pregnant and Han Ting is taking care of her. She says, "My baby should be like you." Han Ting says, "I want a daughter like you." Then we see a scene 7 years after their wedding. Their baby has grown up. A few years later, they have another baby. When the children grow up, Ji Xing says to Han Ting, "I wish I had a daughter like my princess." Her 2 sons come to her and say, "You are also our princess. Dad said we have to protect you." Ji Xing smiles. She says, "After some time, we will get old, and it will be time for us to go. If you leave before me, I will never forgive you." But then we see a scene many years later. Ji Xing is sitting alone. Han Ting has passed away. He gave her a forgiveness card because he left before her. Then our drama ends.